Imagine standing on a wooden ship in the middle of the sea, watching your city burn. Not your enemy's city, your city, your home, your streets, the temples where your children prayed, the markets where you spent every morning, the walls you thought would protect you forever. Gone, consumed by fire and smoke, rising into the sky like a black curtain. And you did not run. You did not look away. You watched. They stood on ships and watched their homes burn. Not by accident, not by defeat, by choice. Every man on those ships made a decision. They chose to leave. They chose to let it happen. They chose fire over surrender. And here is the part that will stop you cold. They were not losing the war. They were setting a trap. So the question is, why? Why would any people, any civilization, any army destroy the very thing they are fighting to protect? How does burning your own city lead to victory? And who came up with a plan this extreme, this cold-blooded, this brilliant? Because this was not panic, this was not desperation, this was a strategy, designed by one man, executed with terrifying precision. And before this story is over, you will understand why historians call what happened next one of the greatest military decisions in human history. But to understand the answer, you need to understand just how bad things were. Go back to the summer of 480 BC. The Persian Empire is the largest the world has ever seen. It stretches from Egypt to India. It controls millions of people. Its king, Xerxes I, has assembled a force so massive that ancient historians claim the rivers ran dry when his army drank from them. That number is probably exaggerated, but the point stands. This army was enormous, unstoppable, moving west like a wall of iron and fire. Xerxes wanted Greece, all of it. And for most of that summer, it looked like he was going to get it. At Thermopylae, a small force of Greek warriors, 300 Spartans and several thousand allies, held a narrow mountain pass for 3 days. They fought with everything they had. They died to the last man. Their sacrifice slowed the Persian advance, but it did not stop it. After Thermopylae fell, the road into central Greece was open. City after city had a choice, fight or surrender. Most surrendered, and Xerxes kept marching. Every day the Persian army moved closer to Athens, dust rising from the horizon, thousands of boots on the road, the sound of an empire moving. Back in Athens, the people knew what was coming. Word traveled fast. Refugees from the north arrived with stories. Cities burned, people enslaved, temples destroyed. Fear moved through Athens like a disease. The Greek alliance, dozens of city-states trying to coordinate a defense, was fracturing. Some wanted to retreat to the southern peninsula of the Peloponnese and build a wall there, defend the south, abandon the north, abandon Athens. But one man refused to accept that plan. One man saw something no one else could see. His name was Themistocles. He was not a king. He was not a general with a legendary bloodline. He came from a relatively ordinary family by Athenian standards, but he had something rarer than noble blood. He had a mind that worked differently. While other Athenian leaders argued and panicked and looked at the map the way it was, Themistocles looked at the map the way it could be. Years before Xerxes ever crossed into Greece, Themistocles had been preparing. He was the one who convinced Athens to invest in its navy. When a silver deposit was discovered near Athens, the city debated what to do with the money. Some wanted to distribute it to citizens. Themistocles pushed for something different. Build ships, 200 of them. At the time, many thought it was excessive. Athens was a land power. What did Athens need with 200 warships? Themistocles knew. He saw what was coming long before anyone else admitted it. And now, with the Persian army marching south, he stood in front of the Greek alliance and said something that stunned the room. He said, "This war will not be decided on land." Others laughed. Others argued. The Spartans, who were the greatest land warriors in the world, wanted to fight on land. They were trained for it. They lived for it. Themistocles held his ground. He said, "The Persian army is too large to beat in an open field. On land, their numbers crush us. But on water, we have a chance. Not just a chance, an advantage, but only if they fought in the right place, and only if the Persians could be made to come to them." First, Athens had to be emptied. This is the part of the story that breaks you a little when you sit with it. The Athenian leadership issued an announcement. The city would be evacuated. Every man, woman, and child. The men of fighting age would board the warships. Everyone else, the elderly, the women, the children, would cross to nearby islands and coastal towns. They would leave with whatever they could carry. Imagine what that morning looked like. People packing their most important things into bundles. Mothers carrying children on their backs. Old men looking at their homes one last time. Dogs running through empty streets that were never empty. The city that had stood for centuries, that had produced philosophers and playwrights and democracy itself, was being abandoned. Some people refused to leave. A small group of elderly citizens and die-hard defenders barricaded themselves on the Acropolis, the great rocky hill at the city's heart, surrounded by the temples of the gods. They believed the gods would protect them. The gods did not. When the Persian army arrived, they found Athens almost silent. No army waiting, no citizens in the streets, no resistance, just emptiness. And then Xerxes burned it. He burned the Acropolis. He burned the temples. He burned homes and markets and everything that made Athens, Athens. The smoke rose so high that the Greeks on their ships, miles away at sea, could see it. They stood on ships and watched their homes burn. Some of the men wept. Some went silent. Some stared with an expression beyond grief, something colder, something harder. But here is the thing Xerxes did not understand. He thought burning Athens was a victory. It was not. This is exactly what Themistocles wanted. Now understand the geography, because the whole plan depended on it. Between the Greek mainland and the island of Salamis, there is a strait of water. It is narrow. Very narrow, not much wider than a few hundred meters in places. Themistocles looked at that strait and saw a weapon. The Persian fleet was enormous. Estimates range from 600 to over 1,000 ships. It was a floating empire. Row after row of triremes, long oared warships built for speed in open water. In open water, that fleet would have destroyed the Greeks completely. Numbers alone would have crushed them. But in a narrow strait, the Persian ships would have nowhere to maneuver. They would crowd against each other. They would crash. They would obstruct their own movements. Their size would become a liability. The Greek fleet, roughly 370 ships, was smaller. But they were fighting in home waters. They knew every current, every shallow, every shift in the wind. The plan was elegant in its ruthlessness. Draw the Persian fleet into the strait, force them into chaos, hit them before they can reorganize. But there was one enormous problem. Themistocles could not simply order the Persian fleet into the strait. He needed Xerxes to choose it, and the Greek alliance was on the edge of collapse. Some commanders wanted to retreat further south, abandon the strait entirely, pull back to the Peloponnese and defend the wall being built there. If the Greeks ran, the plan was finished. If Xerxes decided to wait, to starve the Greeks out, to attack by land and force the fleet to abandon its position, the plan was finished. Everything depended on Xerxes making the wrong move. Quickly. Something had to push him. And so Themistocles did something extraordinary. He sent a message to Xerxes. A secret message, delivered by a slave in the middle of the night, rowed across the dark water to the Persian fleet. The message claimed that Themistocles, the man leading the Greek defense, wanted to defect, that he was secretly loyal to Persia, that the Greek alliance was falling apart, that if Xerxes attacked now, immediately, he would find the Greeks in chaos and confusion. Some would even fight for Persia. It was a lie, every word of it. But it was a perfect lie, because it told Xerxes exactly what he wanted to believe: that his enemy was weak, that his victory was close, that hesitation would cost him everything. Xerxes believed it. He ordered the fleet into the strait. He had been manipulated completely, not by weapons, not by warriors, by words. Themistocles did not just fight Xerxes, he controlled him. Xerxes even positioned himself on a golden throne on a hillside overlooking the strait, ready to watch his fleet destroy the Greeks. He had scribes with him, ready to record the names of commanders who performed well. He expected to watch a massacre. He was going to watch one, just not the one he imagined. The battle began at dawn. The Persian fleet entered the Strait of Salamis, row after row of warships, hundreds of them, moving in tight formation, drums beating, oars churning the dark water. And then the Greek fleet, which had appeared to be in retreat, turned. All of it. 370 ships pivoting in the narrow water, driving forward. The Persians, already packed into the strait, had no room to respond. The front ships tried to hold their positions. The ships behind them, still entering the strait, pushed forward, unaware of what was happening ahead. The formation buckled. Ships turned sideways. Oars snapped against each other. Hulls ground together with sounds like thunder. The Greeks had trained for this. They drove their bronze-fitted rams directly into the sides of Persian ships. One clean strike, timed perfectly, could hold a trireme and send it to the bottom. The Greeks hit and pulled back and hit again, methodical, controlled. The Persians were fighting each other as much as they were fighting the Greeks. The Phoenician ships, Persia's best sailors positioned on one wing, were cut off from the main fleet by the chaos. A squadron of Greek warships hit them before they could reform. The Persian left flank collapsed. Then the center began to break. Ships were sinking. Sailors who could not swim, and many could not, were drowning in the narrow water between the hulls. Commanders shouted orders that could not be heard above the screaming and the crashing and the grinding of wood on wood. And on his golden throne on the hillside, Xerxes watched. He watched his scribes stop writing names of heroes. He watched his fleet, the greatest naval force ever assembled, tear itself apart in a corridor of water less than a kilometer wide. He watched 300 years of Persian expansion begin to come undone. The battle lasted most of the day. By the time the sun moved toward the western hills, the Persian fleet was broken. Hundreds of ships were sunk or captured or simply drifting. The water was choked with wreckage and bodies. The Greeks had lost fewer than 40 ships. The strait was theirs. Xerxes did not speak. He sat on his throne above the carnage of his fleet and understood what had happened. He had crossed mountains and rivers with millions of men. He had burned one of the great cities of the ancient world. He had broken through the famous pass at Thermopylae. And he had lost, not to a larger force, not to better weapons, not to a god descending from the sky. He had been outthought. One man had looked at a map, understood something about water and space and human psychology, and had engineered a trap so precise that Xerxes walked into it believing it was a victory. Within months, Xerxes retreated north, back toward Persia, leaving part of his army behind under a general named Mardonius. That army was defeated the following year at the Battle of Plataea. The invasion of Greece was over. So what does this story mean in the end? Athens was burned, physically destroyed. The temples, the homes, the streets, gone. But Athens survived. More than survived. In the decades that followed Salamis, Athens entered one of the most extraordinary periods of cultural creativity in human history. The Parthenon was built. Socrates walked the streets. Sophocles wrote his plays. Democracy grew deeper roots. All of it possible because a city chose to lose itself rather than surrender itself. Because one man understood that sometimes the only way to protect something is to let it go, just long enough. The lesson of Salamis is not really about ships or strategy. It is about clarity. When everyone else was reacting to fear, Themistocles was thinking. When everyone else saw the Persian army and saw the end, he saw a geography and saw a plan. When everyone else wanted to protect what they had, he was willing to risk everything for what could be. He lost his city to save his future. And 2,500 years later, we are still telling this story. Because that is the other thing Themistocles understood. The ones who think differently, who sacrifice strategically, who stay calm when the world is burning. Those are the ones history remembers.